My name is Shia, and I am here with my dear friend, Neola Sparkus, who is dealing with healing the shadow in your relationships. Neola is a licensed spiritual practitioner who coaches individuals to heal the shadow in their relationships, maintaining that everything in our lives is a relationship which reflects our primary relationship with ourselves. Neola, whether she is counseling, writing, training, or speaking, synthesizes principles of science of mind with today's best personal development methods. She was certified as a life coach in 2001. She studied under the founder of Coach University, Thomas Leonard, and holds her practitioner license at Dr. Michael Bernard Beckworth's Agape International Spiritual Center and at the Centers for Spiritual Living. Welcome.
Thank you, Shia. It's a true pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Before I start the first question, I just want to say that one of the reasons that you have been so dear in my life is that I consider you to be not just a spiritual practitioner in name only, but you walk your talk. You live your life and practice it daily, and are a woman of impeccable consciousness, always ferreting it out and shining a light on the shadow. So it's my great pleasure to be speaking with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And everybody, I did not pay her to say that. So,
Not yet, anyway. No. Neola, I understand that Dr. Michael Beckworth performed the marriage ceremony for you and your husband Fritz a little over 17 years ago. Tell us how, at the time that you knew our dear Fritz was your soulmate.
well, I love the story, but I'm not going to get into all the details. But I'll just say that I was having, dysfunctional relationships, and then I worked on myself, and the relationships got better and better and better. But I was still like confused about like how will I know my soulmate? So I decided that whenever I come across a couple that was happily married for a long time, I would ask them, how did you know that your partner was the one? And without any exception, every single woman would tell me, I just knew. I just knew. And that would totally frustrate me because the whole time I was dating, I never knew. And I didn't know what they were talking about and how do you know and how can you tell? And then I met Fritz. And now, mind you, the very first time we met, I was seeing somebody else. So I wasn't emotionally open and my heart wasn't open to him. We were introduced as acquaintances and then we circled around each other for like 4.5 years. I'm seeing other people, he's seeing other people. And then there was the night that I say, fate threw us together. And by the end of that evening, we both knew, oh my God, you're the one. Oh my God. So there is this knowing, there is this knowledge, and it really does not feel like any of the other relationships where I was either infatuated or head over heels in love, or, there was this excitement, or, with Fritz and me, it was a calm knowing, like, oh my goodness, you're the one. I finally met the one. So following up on this little story, I want to share a very beautiful story that I found to be very inspirational. When Fritz and I got married, we bought a house, we opened a post-production facility in our early years together, and we had the privilege of working with a number of celebrities. And one of them was Julian Lennon, who was working on the documentary called Whale Dreamers. And we were helping with the very beginnings of that documentary. And it is about an indigenous tribe of people in Australia called the Mirning tribe. So these Mirning people are known as the Whale Dreamers. And they had a beautiful story about lovers. They said that when a soul is born onto this planet, it takes, the soul splits and one takes a male body, one takes a female body. because it enters this duality. That's what we have here on the planet, is a duality. And the male being and the female being live totally separate lives. And the Murnings say if the two beings live a virtuous life, then they are destined to be reunited in that lifetime as true soulmates. And that's totally what I experienced when I met my husband. We were so much in tune with each other. I felt like we truly were one soul. And I met him, kind of late in life too. So I just want to tell everybody it's never too late.
Never too late. Well, that's a beautiful story, and lovely that it came from Julian. The parents that are so magical and mystical in their own way. So let me ask you this. Let's go back to that story. If the twin souls live a virtuous life, they'll be reunited. Do you think you and Fritz both lived a virtuous life? Maybe what does that mean to you?
Oh yeah, we were very virtuous. We were both musicians, so I'll leave it up to your imagination what our pasts were like. But I'm gonna say that I think we were both pure in heart, is the way that I would define it. And I'm going to, we each had been on a different spiritual path in our own way. I'm going to reinterpret that Murning's definition of a virtuous life to mean a life that is more in alignment with your higher power, your greater self, than with your personality, your egoic needs, or your unconscious coping mechanisms, which are all in the domain of the shadow. So, we want to be in alignment with our higher power. And I'm sure a lot of people have an idea of what the higher power is. To me, the highest power in the universe, without question, is the power of love. And, ancient people used to think that the brain was in our heart, because when we're open to our heart, we have access to our greatest wisdom, and we connect with our power of attraction. We're in our flow. All of that is powered by love. Love is what heals us. Love is what transforms our lives. There are biologists today. I'm thinking of the South American Chilean biologist Humberto Maturana, who gives his theory of how we evolved. It could only have been through love, through cooperation, through coordination with each other. It definitely was not through competition or warring tribes. That would not foster physical, biological evolution. So, this all brings to mind that old movie Pollyanna, and the story of Pollyanna when she moved into a new town, and there were certain people in the town that were just crabby and crotchety outcasts, and nobody liked them. And she was innocent. She didn't know that they were ostracized. She just visited them and gave them her love and acknowledgement, and suddenly these people started blossoming and transforming into beautiful, happy, smiling beings contributing to the community. So that's a beautiful, gorgeous example of the power of love. So, when we're talking about being in alignment with your higher power, it's making all your choices based on the highest love and looking at everything within yourself that is unlike love and learning to release it. We're all here on a journey to learn how to love more and more perfectly. And the more we become love, the more we attract love, because the greatest love of all, as the song says, is learning to love yourself. So if you learn to love yourself so much that you have an overflow, that's when you want to share that love with others. So many people are going about it the opposite way. They don't have enough love. They're not loving themselves enough, and they're looking for everybody else to give them the love. And that's not how it works. It's not how you're going to attract the right partner for yourself. So the more you love, the more you attract love. And that, to me, is the meaning of living a virtuous life, where we will be reunited with our true soulmate. Just being in alignment with your higher love, releasing everything that is unlike love, and truly being love.
That sounds wonderful. And it sounds like that virtue, not so much the dogmatic religious ideologies that virtue is seen to be, but more about knowing yourself, living your truth in consciousness. And the shadow is fear, and it just, we move forward in love, and sometimes the shadow will trip us and say, hey, need to deal with this. That's a great that's a great explanation of virtue, and maybe one of those words that we can reclaim in,
Yes,
in
yes,
our
please.
language.
Give it a new definition.
That's right. That's right. Um, so. Some people who are listening might not know what the shadow is, and we've bantered here and there about it in just the last few minutes. Could you just give us a brief overview of what you see shadow as, and how it can reflect and affect all of our relationships? Maybe like a Shadow 101.
Shadow 101. Okay. So I didn't originate the term. It was actually originated by Carl Jung in the 1930s, 40s is when he was the most active. And his definition is that the shadow is everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. And last fall, when I did my first summit and interviewed 21 experts and asked them all their definition of the shadow, my favorite definition was by Michaela Boehm, who said that it's simply our blind spot. It's what we don't see in ourselves that perhaps is very clear to everybody around us who knows us well. So, the way that the shadow is formed as we are growing up, when we're too young to know how to maturely handle certain experiences that created intense emotional responses within us, we came to certain conclusions about these events. We made certain decisions, and therefore, about the nature of reality, what is safe, what is not safe, and it became unsafe to feel those emotions. So we just stuffed them down inside of ourselves, and that's how the shadow is born. So I'll give a little example. If your family was not demonstrative with love, if they were not touchy-feely, didn't hug, didn't say I love you a lot, so then you are taught that it's not safe to show any emotion. It's not exactly forbidden by the family, but it's just not cultivated or developed. So you probably stuff down your emotional sensitivity, your vulnerability, and you might decide to even live more in your mentality, in your head. Maybe your family really valued braininess. So you might become very smart, able to figure a lot of things out, get through school with flying colors. Maybe you even go for the advanced degrees. But then you go out in the world and you might have difficulty feeling emotional connection to others, allowing your heart to open and to feel vulnerable. And vulnerability is what connects us to each other. So that's something that you stuff into your shadow, and you don't even know that you're not in touch with it, that you don't see it, you're not connected to it. And there are actually many different things that can be tucked away in our personal shadow, unknown and unseen by our conscious mind. There are all those parts of us we disowned, that we just decided we didn't want to be that way. And we stuffed down the emotions that we couldn't handle. Our fears, as you mentioned, can be stored in our shadow. Shaming messages we were given, any guilt messages we were given. Also, there is something called the light shadow. And this I find with a lot of women, were not taught to be able to acknowledge themselves. So we stuff into our shadow what's good about us. No, I'm not that. No, you're being too kind. That I can't take that compliment. So you might have stuffed what's good about you into your shadow. There's a great little book by Robert Bly, and it's a very thin book. It's called The Little Book About the Human Shadow. I think you're familiar with it. And in it, Robert Bly kind of describes the shadow like a big, huge bag that we throw over our shoulder, and we've stuffed everything into that bag, and we're dragging it around in life. And every time we come up with something that doesn't fit in with the view of reality that we created when we were children, it goes into that bag and it gets bigger and heavier, and it starts to interfere with the life that we want to create for ourselves. And I want to make a little bit of a distinction. You know, I mentioned the light shadow. So I want people to know that the shadow is not just our dark side. They think that it's only negative energy or negative ways of behaving. And what's interesting about that societally, if we're afraid of showing ourselves to be negative, you know, showing a negative side of ourselves, and this is especially true in spiritual circles, we're all so trying to be positive and trying to be loving, and it's kind of considered unacceptable to show any kind of negativity whatsoever. And we all want to feel accepted by the group, to feel like we belong. So actually the fear of negativity causes us to create a shadow. So that fear we put into the bag, and we don't even see that we're, you know, afraid of being negative, and we repress that negative parts of ourselves. And ironically, as you know, it's the repression of our darkness that causes it to come out with greater force than when it gets triggered. You know, if we didn't have such a huge fear of being negative and we just accept that, you know, hey, sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm moody, sometimes I get critical, and then we could flow freely through these states and get back to our positive states much more quickly without getting stuck, because we will go back to center if we allow these emotions to just flow freely, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's probably very much a more feminine thing that we've always been said, don't get angry. You're supposed to be nurturing and loving. And what it does, yes, you're right. It causes us to step back into the shadow. And as we were discussing previously, that especially for women, sometimes our society, because of the patriarchy has isolated women in their shadow. They've isolated us from one another. They've isolated us from our own true self. And like, as you know, pain and anger are sort of like fevers. You know, they're there to tell you something is not right. Right. And I think you would agree that it's about not getting stuck in them.
Yes.
That's the getting stuck in them is what really causes us to cling to the shadow. But if we can embrace them and move through them, that was great. That was absolutely
beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
So I will ask you this: do you think you were talking earlier about the analogy of someone who grew up in a family that was maybe not demonstrative, and there may be a lack of intimacy, and so we sort of retrain ourselves to that person to not be open to it. Do you think that fear of the vulnerability, the intimacy, also causes us to choose wrong relationships?
Absolutely. Anything that we fear, you know, basically the way that it works is whatever we store in our bodies, our emotions are stored in our bodies and our nervous system. We hold on to those dangerous memories. And this is how our personality construct is born. The personality construct is very important. It causes us, you know, it is helpful. It's a helpful tool for us to interact with each other. It is our survival self. We use it to look for danger and warning in the world, which is also important because, you know, we're in bodies that can be destroyed. We're not spirits here on this plane. And so we need to be mindful that we don't get destroyed somewhere along the way. So the personality construct is very much concerned with what is dangerous. And therefore, if you have a fear of intimacy, whoa, that is off limits. You know, intimacy is in the shadow bag. And nature, we do belong to a self-healing system. Our bodies heal ourselves. And nature, in its infinite wisdom, is going to bring us the exact experiences, the exact people that will bring up these feelings so that we can look at them and we can finally release them from our bodies and from ourselves. Now, the problem is the personality construct is not conscious of this being the self-healing system. It is still very invested in protecting ourselves from feeling those feelings. So therefore, we don't know exactly how to deal with those feelings when they come up, and we don't realize that there is a way to purge them, to release them, to get them out of our body once and for all, and we could be so much healthier after that, and that really frees us to attract the kind of experiences, situations, love relationships that we want and the people that really we would love.
Right. So it's not the shadow that's driving us, it really is the love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the shadow will drive us until we look at it. And then it has less power over us once we look at it, once we see what's in there. Otherwise, it totally has power over us, and it runs, it runs 90% of our unconscious mind runs. What am I trying to say here? Okay.
Amok, just causing confusion and chaos. And
Let me rephrase that. I'm trying to say that 10% of our lives are run by our conscious mind, and 90% is run by the unconscious mind. So if you have a lot of stuff stuffed in that shadow that you haven't looked at and you haven't aired out and brought to the light, that's what's running most of your life.
and choosing the relationships that are going to be repeating those same patterns that have always
Exactly.
been there.
Exactly.
So if we have the shadow and it's unexplored, does that affect who we choose as a mate? I mean, does it affect who we draw in or how long the relationship lasts? How does the unexplored shadow affect us or control us or
Yes. So we were speaking to that a little bit. So the shadow's a defense mechanism. Its purpose is protecting us from feeling what we have disowned and what we have repressed. So it really means well, and it really loves you. It loves you so much that it doesn't want you to feel those horrible things. So let's take an example. Let's say that you have a message in your shadow bag. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve a great relationship. You obviously don't know it, because if you knew it, you would be able to behave differently, but you don't know it. It's running you. It's attracting to yourself somebody who's going to agree with that message. That's right. You don't deserve love, right? So you're going to go through this relationship, and it is going to become clear to you that you just don't like this person constantly hammering at you, being critical or whatever, however it plays out, this shadow scenario. And then what happens to most people, they wake up, they go, okay, I have learned my lesson. I know that I don't want this kind of person in my life anymore. So they break up with them and they say, he's not honoring me, he's not respecting me, or it could be she, whichever of the partners. And then you go, phew, that was a close one. That was not a functional relationship. Now I'm really ready. I've learned my lesson. And, you go out, you meet a new person. Everything's wonderful in the beginning, because in the beginning it always is. And there's this fabulous chemistry, and we're on our best behavior. And you're feeling like, oh, I'm so madly in love. And then over time, the real true self shows up, and before you know it, you're in the same dynamic again. And it's like, what the heck? How did he end up being, or she end up being the same as the last person that I was with? So then we have a tendency to say, it's their fault. And then I hear a lot of women saying there's no quality partners out there, and actually we've got to be looking at ourselves and going, oh, could I be attracting something here because of something inside of myself that I need to look at? And, nature is just trying to get our attention and go, yoo-hoo, hello, knock, knock, knock. There's something in here that you need to look at. So, because we don't know what it is about us, we don't see it. And the way that we're built, we need each other in order to help us grow. And this is where I think the most beautiful part of our biology is we need each other. This is the way that nature figured it out. It puts people together to help us grow. So it could be your intimate partner, or it could be a family member, or it could be a very close friend, Or, of course, if you don't have anybody around you that really knows you and can see your shadow self, then you go to a professional, see a coach. But eventually, you do have to look at that stuff. You need somebody else to tell you what it is. You got to feel the feelings that you've stored in there, feel them fully, and release them and give them expression and listen to their message for you.
So I couldn't help but reflect in that moment of when my son's father and I decided to split. And we talked about this whole metaphor in our society of marriage being tying the knot. And as we looked at our 20-year relationship, we realized it was this ball of thread all tangled up, and thought, how do we take the lessons we've learned with each other, consciously unravel the thread so we don't do it again? Of course, we both did, but sometimes it takes a couple of those realizations before you actually get it.
You let out a little more each time. You learn a little more each time. I mean, while I was dating, when I was doing conscious dating, then each relationship would get better, until I finally had the healthiest relationship, which didn't work out for other reasons, right before I met my soulmate. So that's how I knew I was really ready, because I had had the best relationship I'd ever had.
That's excellent, excellent. I want to go back to, you said feeling the feelings. I know you touched on this, but for people who may not really know what that means, can you tell us a little bit about maybe what that looks like? Do we just sit and feel them? I think most people are actually, most of us are afraid to feel the feelings. So how do you, as a relationship coach, how would you move people towards opening to feeling the feelings, but in a safe and controlled way?
Right. So what happens with most people, and mind you, in my sessions, we'll be exploring, asking questions, and then inevitably something triggers. So that's a great way for the feeling to come up, because sometimes people say, I don't feel it. We're not necessarily in touch with it until we get triggered, unless it's one of those lingering feelings. And I've had those too, where, my goodness, I'm just stuck in this funk for days, weeks, whatever it used to be. These days, thank God, a few minutes. But so for most people, really, it happens when they get triggered. And unfortunately, right there in the moment of trigger, it's not the right time for you to sit and process your feeling. You might be with somebody, and of course, with people, a lot of people that I counsel and coach, they say it happens at work. Mm-hmm. And that's just like not the environment for having people have compassion for you and ask you how you're feeling in that moment, holding your hand and letting you cry. Unfortunately, business has to be taken care of and things have to move along. So all that you can do in that moment, if you're in public, if you're at work, if you're with somebody else, is strive to calm yourself down as best as you can. Take deep breaths. Deep breathing really helps you to release that feeling. But I always encourage everybody to get with themselves later on at some point. If you can, on your lunch break, go into the ladies' lounge and lock yourself into a stall and just get with your feelings. Or if you go back home in the evening and get yourself some space in your room, and or if you have a trusted friend that you could talk these things out with, or if you don't, then you go see a professional. But you do your emotional processing when you can give yourself some time and some space to process safely in a nice, quiet environment where you're either with somebody you totally trust who really knows what they're doing, or you're on your own and you can reflect back to you what came up for you in that moment when somebody triggered you. Just try to recall that situation, try to put your finger on it, try to call up the feeling within yourself, And journaling is a fabulous way for us to find words
Right.
for what we're feeling. Of course, the kind of journaling that is most helpful is if you're reflecting on the thoughts and feelings that you're having about the event that happened, rather than just writing out the event. They said this and he said that and she said this. Instead of the events, get really into, I felt this way. I thought this shouldn't be. I thought this. I felt that. Get in touch with the feelings. But before you journal, really sit with your body. Because as I said, the emotions are in our bodies. And just really ask yourself, what are the sensations in my body? Am I feeling it in my stomach? Does it feel like butterflies? Do I have a lump in my throat? Is there an ache in my heart? Do I have a headache? Tension headache. And just get in touch with your body and keep trying to actually feel that feeling, recall it. And I even tell my clients to re-stimulate it. Get yourself to really feel it, feel it, feel it. And I actually, before I go on with this, I want to make a distinction because it's very important. Most of us operate from the level of our personality construct, which is the construct we created that's full of defense mechanisms. And that's in response to everything we shoved into our shadow. So the personality is not the point of view that we want to have. We don't want to use that for healing our emotions. Basically, the personality is going to be saying, this is who I am. They're going to start coming up with a story to justify that emotion and go, they wronged me and I'm a victim here and this is what I'm like. This is all of the identification with the emotion, and it doesn't want to release that emotion. So that's not the point of view to be able to heal yourself. You have to get in touch with what I call the authentic self, the higher power, the greater person, who you are without limitation, and that side of you is the observer, the witness. So you just observe yourself feeling like crap, basically, and listen to the message of that feeling. Just allow that feeling to run its course. Because if we allow it without getting attached to it, without telling a story about why we're justified having that feeling, without feeling pity for ourselves or victim or any of that, if we just are there with compassion, with love to feel it and to allow that feeling to be expressed. Because think of it this way. These feelings are from maybe when you were 4 years old, and that side of you wants to have a voice. It wants to have an outlet. It's trying to tell you something. And so if you just observe it with compassion, let the feeling flow and then listen. What are you saying to me? What are you telling me? And you're going to get a message. It's either going to be a message about something that you need to let go of from your past, or a message of how to put something more positive in place for your future, and have the intention of releasing it. Personality wants to stay attached to it. Authentic self, release. I'm going to release this completely from my body. So you get right into the center of that emotion until it almost overwhelms you. You feel it so much through your body. And actually, when you really release it, you will feel it. You're going to feel like your body just vomited or orgasmed, or, this tremendous release of energy. You will feel like it is gone. And you're going to feel so much lighter. And in the coming weeks and months, you're going to notice that you don't have the trigger that you used to have, or maybe you'll have it a little bit, slightly less, if you only released a portion of that feeling that's stored inside of you. So that's basically how you do it. And I know there's people like Eckhart Tolle, whom I totally adore, and he has definitely influenced me a lot. But he says the pain body is just there to constantly replay the emotion, whereas I really agree with the Russian catharsis method, that you can purge it completely. And I have had that experience myself, and I've had my clients experience that, so I know that it can be totally gone.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And the the when you do purge those things, they you do you what you are left with is just the pure, authentic self of love. And that is the one who is stepping out of the shadow and can be fully empowered. Um,
Right.
so, for those of us who are spiritual, and as I've told you many times, that one of the reasons I adore having you in my life is because I do believe that you are one of the people who do live a life of consciousness. When those things come up, you are just fearless and grappling with them. Um, so those so we're on a spiritual path, and there is the tendency to focus on working on our own stuff, which is all right and good, and we want to see the other person with love. So when should a person stay in the relationship and just say, okay, okay, I see their shadow side coming up, I love them anyway? And when do they step far enough back to say, I need to go? I mean, how do we know if we're spiritual and we're conscious and we're aware that people have shadows? I think that's a given. When is the right time to stay or leave a relationship that maybe isn't serving our own growth or not serving their own growth anymore?
Well, you know what? You just kind of answered it right there, because the big question that I would ask a client that comes to me with that question is, are you thriving in this relationship? Does this relationship really help you grow? Does it support you in general? Has it always been supporting you, and now the two of you are going through a rough spot? And it might be a rough spot for quite a while, too. I mean, I'm with my soulmate, who is wonderful. I think we're a fabulous match. But we have gone through rough spots that last a year or more, because this is a long-term relationship, 17 years where we have to sort out a bunch of stuff, and we're both growing. So you get to other levels where you have to sort out new stuff on another level, because you both grew, you changed, and now you've fallen into a certain pattern. And it's like, wait a minute, somebody wakes up and goes, I don't feel this is supporting me anymore. So in general, you have to ask yourself, does this relationship on the whole support you, allow you to blossom and expand and accommodate any of your shifts, any of your changes? Is there great communication between the two of you? And you have to ask each other. Each partner has to ask themselves, how committed am I to this partnership? And this, to me, is the true test of love. It really boils down to, do you love each other enough to get through this? With my first husband, the answer was no. It's like, nope, there wasn't enough commonality between us. There wasn't enough support. There wasn't enough in my life of what I love, what I would love to have for myself. And so I had to let him go. It didn't work out. But, also the best thing to do for yourself, if you are up against a really serious question about, is this for me or isn't it for me? I don't know if I can go on. I see potential. I don't know if the potential is going to be realized. Ultimately, you're the one that has all the answers inside of yourself. So don't try to decide this answer from the level of, again, from your personality construct. That's going to get you into your head, and you're going to be going, well, there's these pluses, there's these minuses, and do they outweigh each other? And I don't know.
The columns.
I know, write down the columns, pros and cons, whatever.
Right.
The more you start thinking about it, it's impossible to make a decision from your brain. This is a matter of the heart, right? So again, I always advise everybody to go into meditation, get into a deeply meditative state in order to get in touch with the deepest, most authentic part of you that's not a part of any of your defense mechanisms or egoic identities, like, I don't know if this person looks good with me at the next public, event that we have to go to. None of those considerations. and just, feel it in your body. Our body has so much wisdom. And listen for that still small voice that is just like a little quiet, like it's either a, yeah, I want to stay, or I just can't do this. It's one of the two, just a little quiet instinct, a little hunch. And it might not be anything even verbal, it might just be a feeling. And you just get a sense of it, get a sense of where you're at, get centered with yourself.
It sounds like also too what you're talking about in terms of a very long-term relationship, that when those times come up and you have to question it, it's almost like, is there enough of a foundation? Is there good communication going on? Are we listening? And will that foundation, will the ground support another garden, another spring, another planting, I think that's a really good distinction of it. Ultimately, it's not about those, the personality dictates or what society thinks, but
Right.
is the relationship making you a better person?
Yes. Yeah. I love your analogies of the earth and the planting and the spring.
Being a good pagan priestess
You earth goddess, you.
and and one of the things, just to reflect back, and I include this in many of my own when I perform or officiate a wedding, is, and I really do believe, and I think you as well, that relationships are the kind of last spiritual frontier, and if you are fully conscious and you choose a life with someone who is conscious as well, then they're going to show you absolutely the mirror. They will reflect the best, they'll reflect the worst, but also the potential. That's the exciting part. That if you find that person, they're going to make you better. They're going to make you more of who you are meant to be, that authentic self that you mentioned quite a few times, that we all need to, that's the place where we need to speak, live, act, work from. So,
Yeah, strengthen our connection with our authentic self. And I feel you do that through spiritual practice.
yes, yes. That's the foundation. That's the soil. Do you think, and I think this is a question everybody wants to know, do you think there is a soulmate for everybody?
Woohoo!
Yes.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I absolutely think it's possible. I also think it's probably less likely if you haven't cleared away enough of the shadow stuff, when you're with your authentic self, more connected with your authentic self. I think you will attract the partner who's attracted to who you really are. Because the more authentic you are, the more you're going to attract somebody who really loves you instead of whatever the personality construct was trying to put out into the world. And, we can also, I really do believe we can turn a not so perfect relationship into a soulmate relationship if we both connect with each other deeply enough and are committed to getting past unhelpful programming. Some of the experts that I interviewed last year, Dr. Laura and Johnny Fernandez, they say that soulmate love is your birthright, but it's not necessarily your destiny. You make it your destiny by daily consistent actions that you take of self-love. So I think that that's really true. And a couple of my other experts that have some great things to say about it are Molly Apple and Joe Dunn. They talk about their relationship. They're a couple who are soulmates, and they tell everybody about how everybody is connected at the soul level, and we're all one. So we truly are all soulmates, and anybody who's open to it can have the experience with somebody in their lives. But it's not about so much the person, it's about the quality of the relationship. This means creating enough space of acceptance of the other person and acceptance of yourself, and the other person accepting you, and accepting that just the way things are is the way reality is. And you know, and there's layers of this, and there's stuff that comes up, but if the two of you can really support each other in looking at that stuff and not letting it get in the way of the connection, it requires a high level of intimacy and a lot of intimate skills. So I think that's the answer. It could absolutely happen for anybody. We could turn any relationship into a soulmate relationship with enough desire and commitment. And, you know, there has to be some kind of commonality in order to inspire you to get
Right.
to that level of
This
commitment.
inspiration creates the connection.
Yeah.
And I have, as the years roll by, I have come to believe that we have many soulmates, and because, like, as you were talking about, of different kinds. I know my son is my soulmate. I knew his soul. I knew his soul before I gave birth to him.
Wow.
He's the same person now, 26 years later. So I think, you know, there are sister relationships that are soulmates, but I think the tricky one is that couple relationship where everything becomes so intertwined, and I think that's why that particular one is so challenging to our authentic selves.
Challenging and our spiritual frontier
Yes, challenging and rewarding.
and
Because
rewarding.
reward comes from understanding challenges and clearing and purging them and having the clarity to be able to connect on those intimate levels. So as we begin winding down, I personally, and I think everyone else would like to know, what, my friend, is on your horizon? What's coming up in the work you're doing, which is so exciting anyway, but because I know you, I'm expecting more.
Well, I like to answer to the needs of my community, and my community is asking for a group coaching program. So I'm very excited to start my next 6-month program in July. I do one in January, I do one in July, and it's called 6 Steps to Healing Your Shadow and Creating the Love That You Desire. So we go through one step every month to uncover what's in the shadow, take power over whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, look at the contents of the shadow safely, learn to turn them around, practice self-love, self-esteem, self-acceptance, you know, all levels of self-love, recognize our personal patterns, and release the old beliefs and the emotions that are keeping those patterns in place. And that is a course that is supported with live coaching, group coaching, one private session with me a month. So there is more information if you go to the VIP tab on my website.
Lovely. And I would like to say, in terms of that and what you're offering, and reflect back on something you said about how when these feelings come up and you may not be able to just break down at work or in a meeting or things like that. Personally, what I have found, and I think this connects to your work, which is so important, is a lot of times there is, you know, especially if we're committed to living a conscious life, there is that feeling that something is not right, no matter what it's been triggered. And I have found that the brain, or at least my brain anyway, can kind of just sort of go into this shadowy, mushy bubble. But then as soon as I began to speak,
Ah,
when you begin to speak about it, the words come. And it was like, oh, that's what I'm feeling. That's okay. I get it. So I think that is why your work is so important, because we can, you know, sense what's wrong. But it is in actually giving voice to those shadows that begins to help us transform them into places of power.
yes, thank you so much, because that's exactly what we do in the group. Yeah.
And I think that's a very a powerful gift. And speaking of gifts, I heard you have a free gift for viewers.
I do, and the link is down here below. And I am going to give you a 90-minute conference call. It's called Clearing the Shadow of True Love, How to Face and Release Your Fears, Increase Your Self-Esteem, and Reverse Repeating Relationship Patterns. It's a live conference call I recorded last fall, and in it I address the 3 issues of how to identify and process your fears, a surprising way to increase your self-esteem, how to get to the bottom of repeating relationship patterns, and also I share as an extra little bonus the single most powerful tool for transforming your relationships and your life, which releases a lot of shadow energy. So be sure that you sign up for that and check that one out.
That it would be a great free gift. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of that, because it really does make a difference when you are given a platform, a forum to begin to give voice to those sort of nameless shadow. And as before we started, one of the things that I have in my own work with the shadow that I've come to realize, and I think this is especially true for women, is that yes, we tend to hide you were talking about the light shadow, we tend to hide our
Greatness.
Our greatness. It's like that old thing, you hide your light under a bushel, and part of it is not wanting to be seen. The problem is when we continue to operate from the shadow, people never really see our greatness. That is the gift. That is the gift of dancing with one's own shadow and embracing it, and it makes us stronger. So, do you have any last words of wisdom, my friend?
Well, my darling, it's just been such a pleasure to be here with you. And I think we're going to put a link up to your website as well down below, yes?
Sure, or or maybe put it on my blog spot, which I'm trying to get going. I'm working right now on a book called Feminine Alchemy, a proposal to send off, and working on another book with a friend, Lana Finley, about dancing with those shadows and all the different shadows in our life, which is not is your relationships and grief and all these different kinds of shadows that really make us more than who we are. I often think of the shadow as the gargoyles that stand guard at castles and churches, but these places of power, because what they do is, they scare you away, but it's also where your power lies. So I think your work is so special and so magnificent, because you are giving both women and men the opportunity to enter those very sacred doors of the unconscious. And
I can't say it any better myself. I'm going to end with your words of wisdom. I think that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Shia.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us on Heal the Shadow in Your Relationships, too. And this was the final interview of the series, so I hope you enjoyed it. And be in touch with me.
Bless you.
Bye.